Here is artists working with robotics on stage. They're communicating through the robotics in their dance forms. Now, what they're thinking is being translated onto the screen on stage, and their movements are being put into words. This is one example of an immersive environment where human identity is no longer strictly in the neocortex of the brain, but if that's where you find it, but it's transferred through symbolic imagery onto the screen, and its motor activity reflects the motor activity of the artist or dancer here. Electronic arts and robotics have been augmenting the body for decades. That's the point of this. I wanted to show you that augmenting the body in the arts, especially in robotic arts and bioarts, has been going on since the 60s when electronics first interspersed with computers. And Dr. Roy Ascott is the leading theoretician in that field. Here is Stellark, another artist who I work with from time to time. He uses his body with robotics to emphasize the unnecessary element of the body, but that the emotion is what means, where his identity lies in his emotion. He's worked on robotic faces that interpret his thoughts and speak to an audience through artificial intelligence, but not artificial general intelligence. That hasn't been developed yet. Here's a description of a DNA-sized nanotube which was put into the living fruit flies. Now, this DNA nanotube actually could be looked at through a carbon microscope to identify what it would be like in a particular living organism. So this is the first example of a nanotechnology and nanomedicine put inside a living entity. Here's an example of a cancer patient's breast where this is the biological environmental nanotechnology. This is future use of enhancement into the body to look at the cells, where nanocytes would go into the body and clean up the cancer cells but leave the good cells. Here's an example of a walking mechanism for someone who has the inability to walk. And this is done as an industrial design. This is going into product design. This will enable the individual to get up and move out of the wheelchair and walk. Now, this is leaning a little bit towards the whole body prosthetics, which is the goal of transformative human enhancement. These are examples of individuals who are using smart robotics as part of their augmentation. The next step here would be whole body augmentation. If your body were to cease to exist, but your brain, your neocortex, is still existing, then a new definition of death comes in there, and that part of the brain which is functioning would be put into a whole body prosthetic. So these are the first steps of that. Here's an example of work. I put this in just because I found it quite interesting. This is a clock that's put on the wrist of an individual, and the wrist actually tells the time by the person's energy in the body. The heart, the pumping of the heart, is the battery for the clock. And this just fits flatly on the wrist. I found it quite interesting. But this is a stage where the body is being augmented in interesting ways that communicate about the environment around us, not just internally. This is an interesting prototype which hasn't been built yet, but it's a computer inside a tooth. And it communicates with the individual through the teeth. And this is, again, not a tremendously novel idea, but this is the prototype which determined that particular concept. Again, it hasn't been built. And this is brain on a chip, which I really love, mapping brain cells. And this is going into the next stages of keeping the brain functioning past its apoptosis of cells that degenerate within the brain. And I think I'm up. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it, and I hope you did too.
Quick question from the panel, and then we'll open for discussion.
Oh, stay. Okay.
Just hold it.
As long as it's not the philosopher. Oh, okay. I'm going to get in trouble.
Remember, there's at most one philosopher. So there could be no philosophers.
On the panel.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Or? Cool. I was actually just curious about one of the things that you said. Obviously, lots of ideas in that talk, but you said that you basically designed a prototype for radically enhanced being. I'm just curious about what that is. I mean, you saw the picture.
Oh, yes. I designed in 1997 a prototype called Primo Posthuman. And I use that term because it was the most apt term, and I didn't want it to be cyborg. I wanted disassociation from metal human cyborg. I used my own body in the prototype because, again, I didn't want to be associated with the cyborg. I wanted to make it more human, more familiar, more possible in our graphic narrative. I work with Marvin Minsky with artificial intelligence. I work with Rob Freitas with nanotechnology, Michael Rose with bioengineering, Roy Walford with gerontology, Eric Drexler with nanotechnology, Max Moore with philosophy, some others I can't, Hans Morvik with robotics. And what I did is I came up with a schema idea of if we were to enhance the body and extend it past the 122.3 years maximum, what would we need to do with that body? So it is a conceptual design. It's drawn out as a design. It's an interactive design. And the hypothesis or the supposition there is that if these technologies were incorporated in the body, then the lifespan could be continued. Now, it's also not only a conceptual design, it's the makings for a whole body prosthetic.
So this is sort of prototype in a different sense from like
industrial design.
Or basically, some people would use the term, basically, if the prototype works, then we're ready to go into mass production. So presumably,
yes, it's a prototype that's waiting for its time.
Right. Okay.
The concept's there. It's been published. It's recorded. Now I'm waiting. I've been waiting for 10 years for a nanotechnology and artificial general intelligence and genetic engineering to come about. And I'm watching it slowly but surely come about. So my hope is that that can be realized, because it would be quite wonderful for me.
Great.